not on tonight's agenda. So if you have joined us this evening to comment on any items that are on tonight's agenda, you will speak to those items when we get to them. But for now, it's public comment for any item not on the agenda. I'm going to go to the attendees and take a look, and I'm also going to turn it over to our moderator, Larry.
I think, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
I think I'm on. Okay, great. Great. I do not see any hands up, and I do not see any items via email for public comment.
All right, great. I do not either. So with that, we will close public comment and move forward with City Council and staff comments. And we'll start with staff. Does staff have any comments this evening?
I don't think we do. I think we're running late and we need to keep moving.
All right. Council members. And I see a hand up. Vice Mayor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor Peterson. I just want to ask staff that as we move into the election period, this is my third time requesting a process on our onboarding. As we know, we mixed up, and I've asked for it a couple times, and looking at that and bringing that back. And then also, I just want to touch on the Black Lives Matter movement. Yet again, we have seen another life taken, and I just want to acknowledge that I'm sure Mayor Peterson will talk about this, about an upcoming community forum that she will be leading. Also, I just want to thank Joy Flynn, who has been an outstanding leader in our community in supporting the cause and inspiring others to practice anti-racism. I also want to just acknowledge a speaker at the Black Lives Matter movement, or excuse me, March last month, Bakari Broadnax, who was an incredible speaker, who is from Capitola, and who is really leading the charge on anti-racism here in Capitola. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. I see Councilmember Bertrand has his hand up also.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank the public safety personnel in Santa Cruz and supporting agencies around the state of California, and I think the nation also, the firefighters in particular, and the police department and the various sheriff's members of the sheriff's department. They provide a lot of assistance to the residents that have, in many cases, lost their homes and are in quite dire straits. So with that, also like Chief McManus to, well, he may comment upon this later, but I believe we've had some of our personnel from our police department also give aid. So thank you for that participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bertrand. No additional comments from any other council members? Okay, I've just got a couple, and I'll try to be brief because I know we're running behind. I want to first echo what Councilmember Bertrand said in thanking the fire and law enforcement personnel that are out there for very long shifts, 12 to 24-hour shifts at a time, to put out the fires, to protect the homes of those who've been evacuated. I want to send my heart and my thoughts out to those who have been evacuated. These are very difficult times. And thank you so much, as mentioned, to all of those addressing this issue, but also to our own Capitola PD that is providing additional service as well as our fire. I'd also like to remind for anyone who's listening from out of the area that the county has asked that visitors, tourists, and summer renters return to their home counties right now so that we can allow space for evacuees in our hotels and vacation rentals. This is incredibly important. There are so many people out of their homes right now, and we need to keep as many of our vacation rentals and hotel rooms as possible open for those who otherwise do not have a home at this time. Third, as Vice Mayor Brooks mentioned, on Wednesday, September 2nd, from 6 to 7:30 will be the first of 4 monthly conversations about racial justice and equity in Capitola. These conversations were suggested by Joy Flynn, as Vice Mayor Brooks suggested, and several of our community members have come together to put this together. So if you're interested in participating, the link has been shared on Nextdoor. It's on my Facebook page. If you're interested in participating, please feel free to email me. My email is on the city webpage, and I can provide you with the link to register. Fourth, August 31st is Overdose Awareness Day. And on August 31st, there will be an editorial and op-ed in the paper that I have signed on to, along with Mayor Justin Cummings in Santa Cruz and others, to really draw focus to the stigma of substance abuse that prevents many from seeking treatment. And so that's something that we need to address as a community. And then finally, I received word a couple weeks ago of the passing of a Capitola resident, Emil Edgren. Emil Edgren was a photojournalist documenting the events of World War II and was a member of the U.S. Army Pictorial Service for 4.5 years. He was a contracted photojournalist for International News Photos, the Associated Press, and Unlimited Press International. Emil lived to be 100 years old and is survived by his wife, Lucy, his sons, Robert and David, and his granddaughters, Kristen and Renee. So I would like to acknowledge the passing of a 100-year-old Capitola resident who is well known and loved by many, and convened tonight's meeting in his honor, and to send my thoughts and love to his family. So with that, we will move along to our consent calendar. These are items that will be enacted by one motion in the form listed on the agenda, and there will be no separate discussion on the items prior to the council vote unless a member of the City Council requests specific items to be discussed for separate review. Is there any member of the council that would like to pull an item for separate review? Seeing none, do we have any member of the public that would like to pull an item from consent calendar for separate review?
I don't see any hands, and we don't have any emails requesting that.
Great.
I'll move the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Councilmember Story, second by Councilmember Bosworth. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Councilmember Bertrand.
Aye.
Councilmember Bosworth.
Aye.
Councilmember Story.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brooks.
Aye.
Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the business of the evening, starting with item 8A, receive an update on the city's pandemic response.
Right, Mayor, Council. A second here, I am pulling up the slideshow. All right, is that showing up on people's screens? Great. So this is, I think, maybe the 9th update we've done now on the COVID situation in Santa Cruz County. Our total case numbers are up to 1,700. You can see the epidemiological curve there on the screen, which shows that we did see a spike in cases in probably mid to late July. The trend does seem to be that the case numbers are coming back down, which is great news. In addition, we're at 45 cases in Capitola at this time. This is, if you haven't looked at it before, this is the indicators website page on the website, which shows the different indicators that the state looks as they consider whether counties go on or off a monitoring list. The two indicators that we hit previously, which put us on the monitoring list, was the total number of cases in 14 days, the cumulative number, and we remain over that indicator. And then in addition, it's with the number, and you can see it here, the number of the percentage of cases that come back positive, and there's a threshold of 8%. So when more than 8% of your cases are coming back positive, that's a sign that it's more prevalent in the community. We have since gone back under that threshold, and we'll talk a little bit more about the monitoring list. And then these are the other indicators as well that are tracked when evaluating how we're doing. Statewide, you can see that there was that case statewide, the spike in mid to late July. Case numbers statewide do seem to be coming back down. In addition, the deaths have been slightly trending lower. In general, it seems that the death rate seems to trail the cases by about a month, in my experience, when you look at these things over time. In general, Santa Cruz County remains one of the better counties in terms of the number of cases per capita. You can see there's only a few counties in the state of California with lower cases per capita than Santa Cruz County. This chart also shows that we're just about 20 days behind in terms of the per capita rate, the Santa Clara rates. As I mentioned before, the 42 cases in Capitola that we were put onto the statewide monitoring list on July 27th. And then on the 14th, we came off the monitoring list. And the requirement from the state is that you have to remain off the monitoring list for 14 days before the restrictions will lift. That will be coming up tomorrow. The state has not published guidelines yet about what it exactly means to come off the list. So we are all very actively checking the state's website and communicating with them to try to get guidance about what's going to start happening as of this weekend. So the city issued an emergency order on August 6th that makes it an infraction rather than a misdemeanor for a violation of the countywide mask order. It gives our police department another enforcement tool that can be used to help ensure and gain compliance with the mask rules. The other jurisdictions in the county have done something very similar, created administrative citations. This essentially creates an option to issue a $100 ticket rather than a full misdemeanor for a violation of the mask order. And on your agenda this evening is a resolution to ratify that emergency order should the council wish to do so. As has been widely reported in the press, that earlier this month, the County Board of Supervisors and the City of Santa Cruz have voted to close their beaches on Labor Day weekend. The closures would take effect for all 3 days over the weekend. The ocean would remain open during the closure, and the orders that the City of Santa Cruz and the county have passed do open the sand from 4 to 8 p.m. on both Saturday and Sunday late afternoons. We have prepared the exact same closure for the Capitola City Council to consider, and if the council so chooses, the Director of Emergency Services, that would be me, I will issue our 6th emergency order related to this, and there's a resolution to ratify that order in your packet tonight. At this point, most city facilities are open. We do require social distancing, do have protocols to ensure that the public and the staff members are protected. The closed facilities at this point are the community center, the historic museum, and then we have closed parking, as the council is aware, for outdoor dining. So with that, I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you. It looks like Vice Mayor Brooks has her hand up, and then I saw Councilmember Story.
Thank you, Mayor Peterson. I just have 2 questions. This is for our city manager. Do we anticipate seeing any other closures at this point?
So I think if you're asking about closures for the beach, at this point, there's been no regional discussions about any closures beyond Labor Day weekend. If we're talking about the businesses and economics, I really just don't know what will happen with both the virus and the orders from the state or the local health officer.
Okay, great. And then my second question is in regards to the fines associated with the masks. Is there any way to restrict those dollars for other uses in the city, like our community grants program or our dedicated children's fund or BIA? Is that something we are able to do?
So I think the technical answer is no, not really. The administrative citations would come in, and they're general fund. Restricted funds are usually are associated with voter-approved tax measures, and the voters essentially restrict them. The council certainly has the ability. You have the power of the budget, and you can appropriate the funds however you see fit. Okay, and Samantha, if you have a different take on that, then I'm misreading that or I answered incorrectly, please chime in.
No, that's correct. I mean, the money will go into the general fund, and the council directs expenditures from the general fund. So it just goes into one pot of money. But as to the technical answer, absolutely, we can't very well use it to create a separate fund. council directs from the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Story?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My question goes to the proposed order on page 120 of the packet. And I'm just wondering what the difference really is between an administrative citation and an infraction, since they seem to carry the exact same monetary penalties. So that was my question.
I'm hoping the city attorney can chime in. I think the question, as I understand it, are you asking between what it was before this order and what it is after?
No, as I read the order, it says that it's based on for the mask, lack of a mask, to the following penalties, depending on the determination of the issuing officer, which would be A, an administrative citation, which then says carries a fine in the following amounts, $100, $200, $500. Then it says B, an infraction carrying a fine in the amounts, then it goes on to say $100, $200, $500. So it seems to be an option by the issuing officer, but I don't see a distinction between those two in terms of what the penalties are, and so why it would matter.
I am going to lean on our city attorney on this. This was prepared.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. I'm looking up your muni code now, but for practical purposes, there may not be much difference. If the chief is on the call, perhaps he could step in and help here too. But I'm looking up in your muni code. It could be, and I am no criminal law attorney, it could be that one is a criminal enforcement mechanism and one is a civil enforcement mechanism. But I will, if you want to continue, I will look that up in your muni code right now.
Ed, Mayor Peterson, Council, good evening, if I may. And I think we all understand this, the biggest difference between the previous citations of the health violations is it was a criminal citation. Neither an administrative cite or an infraction are a criminal citation. So that's a clear difference that is probably beneficial to our officers and the public and feeling comfortable going forward with enforcement. But our city attorney is correct. For our purposes, there's virtually no difference between an administrative cite and an infraction. And in fact, the officers will be issuing infractions for violations. Some departments and cities have administrative citation programs in place to process an administrative cite in a circumstance similar to this, which would introduce a level of appeal within the city. The only administrative citation program we currently have in process are the citations related to the animal violations. And so for the purposes of this violation, this muni code violation, we will be issuing infractions for those people who are violating the code. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Chief. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Story?
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is that that the issuing officer will only be issuing infractions. So I'm not sure why it has that dual language. It seems to be a moot point, but I don't think it jeopardizes the order. But thanks for that explanation.
Great. Councilmember Bertrand, you have your hand up. Is that for this item or for the previous item?
Let's be the previous. I'll take it down.
Okay. All right. I just have a question about the beach closures. It looks like they're indicating it'll be closed 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. except on Saturday and Sunday when it'll be open from 4 to 8. Does that mean it closes again at 8? And what is the reasoning behind not just closing it down altogether for the 3 days?
So you're correct, is that it does close again at 8 o'clock at night on Saturday and Sunday nights. The reasoning behind it, because this went ultimately to the county, Santa Cruz first, who were the first ones to approve it, and my understanding was that there was some desire by the Board of Supervisors to have a degree of access for the community, that this is really intended to dissuade people to travel here from far away, but they wanted to be able to allow the community to still get onto the sand at some point on the weekend. So it was a bit of a compromise, is my understanding.
Okay. Okay. Are we're prepared for enforcement?
We are prepared for enforcement. The chief and I have had extensive conversations about it. I think we detailed some of those things in the staff report. We are prepared to get some digital message boards up beforehand to let people know about the closures coming, and then when it is closed, that it is closed. They're not cheap to rent, but it seems like it's worth 2 one-week rentals to put on Park Avenue and Bay Avenue to help get the message out there. In addition, we're prepared to utilize extra help, because our experience is that we need to have staff present on the beach. Otherwise, the closure doesn't work. And then lastly, I would note the difference between this closure and what we had previously is the beach isn't open in the morning, which was really one of the huge challenges with enforcing it, was we had to clear the beach, which is a big task to get everybody off the beach once they've already been on all morning.
So in this case, we'll have staff officers or first alarm or someone there right from the beginning to make sure no one gets on the beach to begin with.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions from council? Doesn't look like it. So with that, we will bring this item to public comment. Now we'll turn it over to Larry, our moderator, to let us know if there's any public comment on this item.
Thank you, Mayor Peterson. I do not see any hands raised at this time, and we have no emails on this item.
Okay. With that, we will close public comment, and I will bring it back to council for discussion and a vote.
I so move the recommended actions for item 8A.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Oops, let me go back to the panelists. Any further discussion from anyone on the panel? I see Councilmember Bosworth has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Brooks, if it suits you, I'm a little uncomfortable with the concept of the beach being open from 4 to 8. Making it feel like that's going to prevent people from coming and utilizing the beach. I would like to make a friendly amendment that that window be closed to 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
So Vice Mayor Brooks, I think we're looking to see if you're accepting that friendly amendment.
Councilmember Bottorff, did you say from 6 to 8? Is that correct?
Closing the beach. The beach would only be open for local people from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
And can you tell me a little bit about why this is?
You know, I'm looking at the numbers that the city manager put up, and it feels like we're trending in the right direction. And I think we can all look at the July numbers and see that we lost a little control there. I realize that it's awkward to close the beach, but I feel like the 4 o'clock window would still allow people to come, and I don't believe it's going to prevent the over-the-hill access as we think. I think that respecting the citizens of Capitola, which I'm mostly concerned about, they want some access to the beach, but they don't want an infusion of people from over the hill. I believe if we allow them that window from 6 to 8 p.m., we would be doing something that goes along with the fundamental beliefs I believe the citizens of Capitola are looking forward to, especially on this weekend when we're so close to continuing the trend of reducing our numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bottorff. I'll go ahead and accept your friendly amendment.
And I believe the second was that Councilmember?
I'll accept it. Madam Mayor, I'll accept the amendment.
Oh, it's Bertrand. Thank you. Okay. So we have a motion and a second as amended. Any additional comments from council? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Councilmember Bertrand.
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff.
Aye.
Councilmember Story.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brooks.
Aye.
Mayor Peterson.
Aye. Thank you. Carries unanimously. We're going to move on to item 8B, discussion of the lighting of the village palm trees. I'll turn it over to staff. And Councilmember Bottorff, if you still have your hand up, if you could go ahead and take it down just so that when we come back to comment, I'll know who's
I was trying, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Public Works Director Jesberg here, trying to get my PowerPoint running. And there you go. The item behind it before us tonight is kind of a continued conversation of the village tree lights that are in the village right now. Some quick background. This will be the fourth time we've discussed this item at the City Council meeting. It all started back in 2018 when we hung the holiday lights provided by the BIA at that time, which were a rope light, a bright white LED light. A significant amount of community input was received, and we started having hearings at February 2019 to decide whether to keep them, what to do. In 2019, which is the most recent hearing we've had before the council directed at that time an ad hoc committee, palm tree lighting committee that had been put together to develop a plan to transition existing rope lights on the palm trees to low voltage LED lights. That plan was due in March, and it was actually submitted in March by the committee. But at that time, it was right when we went into the COVID-19 pandemic, and we delayed consideration of that plan at that time. We were new to how the council meetings were going to run and decided to continue it. Obviously, the pandemic has continued, and so we are now having this hearing through Zoom. Anyway, getting back to the plan, the committee, ad hoc committee plan had included hiring a firm to place low LED warm lights at a cost of $14,000 plus some additional maintenance costs over the years on the palm trees. As part of the proposal, the committee had secured $11,000 in donations toward the project and had requested assistance from the city of $6,000. Unfortunately, since March and with the COVID, those commitments that the committee had gotten have now been reduced to $3,000. And the committee effectively has withdrawn their proposal to move forward. So this is a slide we've seen before. The lights, rope lights you can see are the bright light. And this was a trial the Christmas light installer had installed on one of the palm trees. So you can see the difference between the two lights. The proposal was to go to these warm twinkling lights on all the trees. Excuse me. So without a budget at this point and the constraints on both the city budget, the BIA budget, and other resources, the lighting plan as proposed is no longer practical. It really kind of doesn't give a lot of options. The two most practical options for the council to consider at this time are to keep the existing lights in place. Public Works does have a store of the white light rope lights up at the courtyard from when they were originally purchased, and we could replace those strands that are not operating. The only other option that seems feasible at this point would be to remove all the lights at this time. That is my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are there any questions? Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions, council? I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. Seeing no questions, we will bring it to public comment on this item, and I'll turn it over to our moderator. Looks like we have it hand up.
Yes, I see a hand. Okay, sorry. I will allow her to talk. Karen?
Good evening, everyone. Well, here we are again. I think really in a nutshell, what I have to say is that things are in a very unusual state in the village. A lot of businesses are struggling. Some of the people who were on the committee and going to work with the people who were going to put up the new lights aren't even in business any longer. And the hoopla over the lights does seem to have died down, other than we're getting some comments about why can't the city, make the repairs to the lights. But I think it's become less of a inflammatory issue in the village. But the bottom line is, if you take the lights down, the village will be dark. There's a lot of dark storefronts. It makes it very challenging for businesses who may have a big, empty, dark space next to their business and may have only one street light somewhere on their block. So I would really hope that the city wouldn't choose to take the lights down at this point. I don't know whether all the council members know, but we do have the BIA has taken over the contract to clean the sidewalks, which we felt was the most important thing for our visitors and our residents who walk in the village all the time, is to have the sidewalks clean. I know this is something that, a long time ago the city had hoped the BIA would take over. We never had the finances to do it, but now we're going to pour all of our village enhancement money into keeping the sidewalks clean. So that's the main reason why we have no budget to put any lights up. So if you take the lights down, the village will be dark for Christmas. So we're hoping that you won't be a Grinch and you'll let us have our lights for Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have another hand up, Larry.
Yes. Rodney, you're ready to talk?
Yes, this is Rodney with Capitola Candy Company. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. So I think we can all agree that the lights make our village safer. All the restaurant employees that leave later have all agreed, have all complimented. I understand people's personal opinions of the lights have gotten in the way, and I think we need to put that all aside for now. It's all about what's best for our entire village and not our personal opinions. The lights have created safety. They've enhanced our quaint little village with a little nighttime sparkle. There's nothing against going with the yellow lights at this point. We've all agreed that if everybody will agree on the yellow lights, we're fine with it. But at this point, we have no budget for it. So to take away the lights at this point is ridiculous. It's unreasonable and unfair to us merchants. And I hope that everybody will put that personal opinion aside and think about the village in whole for now. And hopefully in the future we can afford to replace them and try out the yellow lights that the people that have been against the white lights will enjoy. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Larry, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't see anyone else with hands up, but I don't know if we have anyone on the phone or any emails.
I do not see any more hands up, and I do not see any emails.
Okay. All right, with that, we will close public comment for this item, bring it back to council. I see that Councilmember Bottorff and then Councilmember Bertrand have their hands up.
Thank you, Mayor. This issue has been with us for going on, I'm going to say 2.5 years. And what bothers me the most about it is that there seemed to be progress on this that stalled due to lack of financing to replace the new lights. What was clear in the beginning was that when when the city gave the BIA the option to provide lights, it was always lights that were recommended or tasteful. And when the change was made and the new lights were installed, it was a surprise to everybody. And that's what started this process. And what ended up coming out of that is that the lights were going to come down, but there was going to be a committee and they were going to come up with a program, and that was going to be resolved. And that wasn't resolved when it was supposed to be in October. It was pushed because of the holidays to say, let's just decide this in March. And then we all know that in March, COVID came and everything's changed. So what happens is this becomes like any other program in the village that, it was not followed through on. And what's happened now is that the lights have come into disarray. They have become the responsibility of the city, which was not the intent. This was to be taken over to be a program by the BIA, because what we did when we passed TOT tax was we made an allocation to fund the BIA with $30,000 annually at their discretion, with only a minor consideration that they reinvest some of the money into village enhancement. And even though we know that the TOT numbers are down, they're probably still going to be coming in at approximately 15%. So this is a fund that, although 1 year or maybe a year and a half, they may show a slightly different revenue, this is an ongoing budget revenue that the BIA has for village enhancement. And I believe that there was a lot of procrastination about getting the lights done. And I believe that the way we get new lights put up that meet with that appeal to the residents, the village merchants, and everybody in the city is to take down the existing lights because they're not the ones that people want there. Put our heads together, get a program to go. The revenue will continue to come in, and if the BIA will be motivated to get the new lights up ASAP, because if we allow these lights to linger, they become a burden and responsibility for the city. It's already being proposed that the city's going to come and hang the lights and make the repairs. And I think this program needs to be separate. That was the intent of giving that funding to the BIA. It was never the intent for the BIA to clean sidewalks. That is our responsibility. We took that off the table because we took about $2.7 million off the table because of COVID. I think the BIA should have been focused on getting the lights hung because that was the priority. They opted to use the money for sidewalks, which I don't understand. I believe the city has been very generous with the BIA because of COVID. We released 49 parking places at a revenue of approximately $2,000 per spot for 6 months, which is over $100,000 worth of lost revenue to help them open business. We waived all fees for encroachment and for permits. I just think the BIA needs to follow through on the lights and make it a priority. And by taking the lights down, that will make them actually make it a priority and get it done. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to do as we said back in October of 2019, and that is to remove the lights until a new program is created. That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, hearing that, motion dies for lack of a second. We'll continue conversation. I see Councilmember Bertrand has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the merchants stepping forward to clean the sidewalks. I think that shows pride in the area where they're doing business and will reflect well on visitors to come here and see clean sidewalks. I think that's very critical for a merchants area. I'd like this issue to cease right now, so I'd like to make a motion that we accept option one. I move option one.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion continues. Was that the end of your comments, Councilmember Bertrand?
I'm going to lower.
I'm sorry?
Yep.
Okay. Any additional comments from council members? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Councilmember Bertrand.
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff,
No.
Councilmember Story,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brooks,
Aye.
Mayor Peterson.
Aye. Motion carries 4-1. All right, we're going to move on to item 8C, BIA amended budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Jim, may I interject?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Mayor, before you begin this item, as I did before, I recuse myself since I'm subject to this assessment, and therefore I have a conflict. So I'm going to step out of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Story. We'll let you know when we're ready to have you come back. All right.
Let me share my screen with everyone real quick. Okay, as we mentioned, this is the Capitola Village and Wharf Business Improvement Area Assessments for fiscal year 2021. By way of background, as you're all aware, in June of 2005, the BIA was formed. It's a business-based self-imposed assessment district in which the assessments are paid by the businesses within the boundaries of the district for improvements and activities that support those businesses. And the assessment amounts are determined by business classification and number of full-time equivalent employees. Businesses may make in lieu payments in the form of gift certificates for use of the BIA. However, in this year, only hotels, motels, and inns have the ability to issue the in lieu of payments. So a public hearing is required under California state law and our municipal code, and the BIA submits an annual plan and a budget for council approval, for consideration and approval, which was actually done on June 25th of this year. We conducted a public hearing, and the annual assessments were approved at 25% less than the previous year due to the impacts of COVID-19. The BIA is now requesting to utilize a portion of their existing fund balance that they've built up over the last 4 or 5 years and reduce assessments to 50% of the prior year amounts. It should be noted there's no fiscal impact if this is approved. All services provided by the city are reimbursed by the BIA. And just as a reminder, the BIA budget, as previously mentioned, does include the restricted TOT. They get 50% of the restricted TOT that goes to local business groups. And for fiscal year 2021, as of right now, our budget is about $14,500 of restricted TOT revenue going to the BIA. I think they used a little bit of that for establishment of the outside dining, and as Karen mentioned earlier, the rest at this point is programmed into the sidewalk cleaning. So this is what the assessments looked like by business category and number of employees at 75% of what they were the prior year. If approved and we reduce them to 50%, it basically is 2/3 of those numbers up there and will change to the amounts listed on the screen. So staff's recommendation is to conduct a public hearing this evening and adopt a proposed resolution levying the revised fiscal year 2021 BIA assessments and accepting the revised budget. With that, I am available for questions, and I believe, as you all know, Karen is on the line, and I believe there's a few other members of the BIA that are also available for questions.
Great, thank you. Council members, do we have any questions? I don't see any hands up. So with that, we will go to public comment. And I'll turn it over to Larry. It looks like we have at least one hand up.
Yes, I've got Karen. She can speak.
Hi again. I think our treasurer, Devin, is also here available to answer any questions. It's pretty straightforward, just a little further reduction. Clearly, we don't know what's coming next. We don't know. There's just so much uncertainty that we felt that the better option is to have the least additional impact on our members this year, if possible. And the budget looks like it can handle that. and then we assume that next year we'll go back to the full assessment. But I'm here for any questions, and I think Devin is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Devin, you can talk if you want.
Okay. Hi, I just wanted to make sure, this is Devin. I own Capitola Reef, and I'm a board member and treasurer of the BIA. Just a couple of things I wanted to say real quick. In regards to the lowering of the assessment, it really is not going to have any fiscal impact on our budget, because when COVID happened, it took away almost an entire quarter of marketing expense that we normally would have used to market the village towards the oncoming summer. And also, so it left us with more of a rollover amount than we've had in previous years. So actually, I think we're going to be able to spend more money on village enhancement and more money in other areas than we even have in the past, even though we're having that lowering of dues. So I'm just asking for the city council to look at that and understand why we want to go in that direction. And if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you, Devin. All right. Larry, I don't see any other hands up. Do we have any emails or anyone on the phone?
I do not see anybody, and I do not see any emails on this item.
Okay. All right. With that, we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to council for discussion and a vote.
I move to recommended action for item 8C.
We have a motion by Vice Mayor Brooks. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Bertrand. Panelists. Someone have their hand up? Oh, Jacques, was that it? Was your hand up just a second?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Bertrand.
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff.
No.
Councilmember Story. Oh, pardon me.
Councilmember Story.
He's recused. I apologize. Vice Mayor Brooks.
Aye.
And Mayor Peterson.
Aye. Motion carries 3-1. And if we could get Councilmember Story back with us. Welcome back. All right, we're going to move along to item 8D, an amendment to the inclusionary housing ordinance, and I'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Peterson and Council. Just a quick technology check. Can you see my presentation on the screen and hear my voice? Yeah, okay, thank you. This evening we'll be discussing the city's inclusionary housing ordinance and policy questions related to updating the ordinance. So I'm first going to give you an overview of what affordable housing is. Then we'll go into exactly what our inclusionary housing ordinance includes. And then we'll discuss 6 policy items that we would like direction from the council on this evening. Affordable housing means housing that is deed restricted, and residents must qualify to purchase or rent based on income levels. Under an IHO, an inclusionary housing ordinance is referred to as an IHO, the affordable housing cost is typically based on the household's ability to make monthly payments necessary to obtain housing. For sale housing is considered affordable when a household pays no more than 35% of its gross monthly income for housing, including utilities. Area median income is another term you'll hear me say frequently when we're talking about our IHO update. Area median income is the average income for a defined geographical area. Santa Cruz County area median income, also known as AMI, per household size increased this year. This slide shows the current AMI per household size in Santa Cruz. The HCD lists out households up to 8 persons. For simplicity in my slides, I'm just going up to 4, so they're not too busy. But what you're seeing on the slide is the Santa Cruz County AMI, so area median income, the average income. On the previous slide, I showed the AMI for Santa Cruz County. This term is frequently used when talking about affordable housing. There are different levels of income related to the area median income. Extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income levels are based on percentages of AMI. These categories of income are set by the state and utilized to set rental rates and listing prices for affordable housing units. The categories are also utilized in identifying our Regional Housing Needs Assessment, RHNA numbers, that are issued to us through AMBAG. Now I'd like to explain the demand for affordable housing in Capitola. This table is from the city's housing element. The housing element is a required chapter of our general plan, which must be updated on a regular basis. The next housing element update will occur in 2023. This table is from the most recent 2015 to 2022 update. HUD released this data every 5 years, and this slide shows data from 2011. The income categories are listed on the far left column, and the number of households within each income category is in the center column. It is a good indicator of the demand of affordable housing in Capitola. In 2011, 58% of households were in income categories below moderate income levels. In 2019, these numbers were updated. So this is what's in our current general plan. These are this data represents the 2012 to 2016 data that is available. As you can see, the demand for affordable housing is still high, with 43% of households below moderate income, but the demand has decreased from the 2011 data. So what is an inclusionary housing ordinance? An inclusionary housing ordinance is a local policy that either requires or encourages housing developers to include dedicated affordable housing as a component of any residential developments. An IHO, your inclusionary housing ordinance, is one of the strongest tools available to cities for implementing affordable housing policies and creating new affordable units. Within the cities of Capitola, where our IHO is located in Chapter 18.02. It was originally adopted in 2004. The city's IHO was last updated in 2013, and now is a good time for the ordinance to be updated again, as it's been 7 years since we've done a thorough update of our IHO. Capitola's inclusionary housing ordinance applies to all development projects with either an addition of 50% or more of existing floor area, one or more new residential units, or condominium conversions. In the table, you can see the requirements for the different thresholds. Structural additions of 50% or more are required to pay an in lieu fee of $2.50 per square foot. New single-family homes and developments between 1 and 6 new residential units are required to pay an in lieu fee of $10 a square foot. Developments with 7 or more units are required to deed restrict 1 out of every 7 units, or 15% of the units, as a deed restricted affordable unit. The remainder, if there's a remainder such as if there were 8 units, the one last unit would have to pay an in lieu fee at $10 per square foot. Lastly, new rental units are required to pay an in lieu fee of $6 a square foot. The city has 402 affordable housing units. There are 12 inclusionary units that were required by the IHO. Also, we have 166 affordable apartments, in which over 100 are located at the Bay Avenue Senior Apartments across from Nob Hill. There are 6 units owned by Habitat for Humanity and not governed under the city. Also, 218 affordable mobile homes. Of the 12 inclusionary units, 8 are located within the Capitola Beach Villas, 2 in Heritage Lane, 1 in Pearson Court, and the newest unit is located in Terra Court behind Osh. Now that I've given you an overview of affordable housing and the city's inclusionary housing ordinance and the city's inventory of affordable units, I'm going to dive into policy questions which we have prepared for your discussion tonight. I plan to present the 6 policy questions, and once I've gone through each of the policy questions, I'll bring up this slide again. At that time, we'll move forward with questions from the council prior to opening the public hearing. And then after the public hearing, when the council is giving direction, I'll pull up this slide once more so that you have a summary in front of you, and we'll get direction on each of the policy questions individually. Now I'll jump into the first policy item. For the first policy item, staff is asking City Council, should the city maintain the existing required percentages of affordable units at 15%? In general, inclusionary housing ordinances require a specific percentage of units in a new housing development to be affordable to a specific income level. You may recall this table from a previous slide. This table shows the thresholds and requirements of the IHO. When the development comes into the city with 7 or more residential units, the IHO requires 15% of the new units to be deed restricted as affordable units. This table summarizes the on-site affordable housing production requirements from other local jurisdictions. I just want to make it clear that this is not, it's for the on-site requirements. It's not including all of their requirements for in lieu fees and otherwise. The City of Watsonville, as you can see, Capitola, Scotts Valley, and the County of Santa Cruz all have the 15% requirement. The City of Watsonville requires 15% for 7 to 50 units, then increases the requirement to 20% for developments with more than 50 units. The City of Santa Cruz requires developments with 5 or more units to provide 20% of the new units as affordable units. Staff is asking council, should the city maintain the existing required percentage of affordable units at 15%? And our recommendation this evening is to maintain the 15% inclusionary requirement. Now we'll go into policy number 2. Should development of rental units be exempt from the IHO? Here again is the table which summarizes the City of Capitola's IHO. For this policy item, we are asking, should development of rental units be exempt from the IHO? The City of Capitola currently requires rental housing development to pay an in lieu fee of $6 per square foot. The application of affordable housing requirements and in lieu fees for new rental housing development differ by jurisdiction, as shown in this table. Scotts Valley does not have a requirement. The County of Santa Cruz charges an in lieu fee of $2 a square foot, and the cities of Santa Cruz and Watsonville require that 20% of new rental units be rented at affordable levels. Rental housing is generally one of the more affordable types of housing. Unfortunately, in our region, new rental units are not being produced fast enough to keep up with the regional demand, in part because the market rents often do not produce enough return on investment to make development of new rental units appealing to most developers. Based on these factors, it may make sense to encourage more rental units by reducing the in lieu fee on most rental housing projects. This evening, staff is asking if development of rental units should be exempt from the IHO. If the City Council desires to continue requiring affordable housing production or the payment of in lieu fees in conjunction with new residential housing development, the IHO would need to be readopted into the municipal code, into the zoning code, rather than Title 18 to comply with AB 1505, the 2017 law that authorizes inclusionary requirements to be imposed on new rental housing development projects. The zoning code update would also likely trigger a local coastal plan amendment before taking effect in portions of the city within the coastal zone. This option is shown as option 1 of maintaining the in lieu fee for rental units, and then we'd also update our zoning code. Option 2 is to remove the in lieu fees for rental units. If this direction is taken, an update to the zoning code is not necessary. So within policy item number 2, staff is recommending that we remove the in lieu fees for rental units to keep costs lower for producing rental units. For policy item number 3, the question is, what should the city require of developers of large additions to existing homes and smaller developments that contain 2 to 6 units? Again, I have the table up on the slide. The City of Capitola currently requires additions of existing single-family residents that increase their existing floor area by more than 50%, and developments with 2 to 6 new units to pay an affordable housing in lieu fee. The in lieu fee is less for additions at $2.50 a square foot, and for, compared to $10 a square foot for an entire new unit. The application of in lieu fees to developments with 2 to 6 units is the standard in the County of Santa Cruz. But the application of in lieu fees for new single-family development with only 1 unit or in addition to a single-family home differ by jurisdictions, as shown in this table. The column outlined in orange shows the requirement for development for 1 for-sale unit. The City of Santa Cruz and Scotts Valley do not have an in lieu requirement for 1 single unit. Both Watsonville and the county have an in lieu fee. In terms of additions, only the county requires an in lieu fee for an addition along with Capitola. Under the AB 1600 Mitigation Fee Act, cities may charge impact fees to new developments that offset the impacts new developments cause on public services. To comply with the Mitigation Fee Act and the Takings Clause of the U.S. Constitution, there must be an essential nexus between the development and the impacts that the fee seeks to mitigate, and a development fee must be roughly proportional to the development's impacts. Before adopting an impact fee on development, the city must complete a nexus study to determine what impacts the development has on the city's affordable housing stock. The impact fee is then based on that study. After preparing and adopting the study and imposing the fees, the city must prepare an annual report providing specific information about those fees. The nexus study must be updated periodically. In general, a nexus study costs around $35,000 and takes approximately 2 months to complete. The nexus study must be updated periodically. On average, the city currently receives approximately $50,000 per year in lieu affordable housing fees from 1-unit single-family projects and additions greater than 50%. That figure varies year by year depending on the number of projects the city processes. So within policy item 3, we're asking what should the city require of the larger additions and the smaller developments. Staff suggests that the city implement an affordable housing impact fee for single-family development with only 1 unit or an addition to the single-family home, and require developments with 2 to 6 units to provide 1 affordable unit on site or pay an in lieu fee that varies based on the square footage of the proposed development. So now we'll move on to policy item number 4. Should the city structure the IHO requirement to allow an option for developers to pay in lieu fees for the larger developments? As previously discussed, the city requires developers to provide on-site affordable housing for developments with 7 or more units. The requirement is 15% of the total units must be deed restricted affordable. In this policy discussion, we are asking if the inclusionary housing ordinance should be updated to add an in lieu fee option to the on-site affordable housing requirement. In this slide, I compare the speed, effectiveness, and cost of on-site affordable housing development and in lieu fees. There are, of course, benefits and challenges to both. On-site affordable housing is faster with production occurring at the time of the development and results in affordable units distributed within development projects throughout the city. If the city were to add an alternative to allow a developer to pay an in-lieu fee rather than develop on site, more funds would be available to the city to partner with nonprofits and developers on affordable housing projects. The benefit to having more funds available is that more funds could be leveraged to partner with developers and nonprofits to result in possibly in larger affordable housing projects with more units. Also, larger affordable housing projects are typically managed by nonprofits and funded through state housing programs, so the ongoing administrative cost is typically lower for these larger projects. For policy item 4, we are asking, should the city restructure the IHO requirements to allow options for developers to pay in lieu fees for larger projects? Staff is recommending updating the IHO to allow this option. Policy item 5 is a discussion on consolidating all asset limitations in the IHO and increasing asset limitations for affordable senior units. The city adopted an asset limitation in the IHO in 2013 to ensure that applicants with high assets and therefore who do not likely need assistance to purchase housing, even if they have lower annual incomes, did not absorb the city's limited supply of affordable units. Only households which qualify as very low, low, median, or moderate income households and who meet the asset limitation of 1.5 times the income limit are eligible to purchase affordable units. Likewise, in 2014, the City Council adopted an administrative policy, 3-16, implementing the asset limitations in the IHO to potential buyers of mobile homes and mobile home parks governed by affordable housing deed restrictions within the city. The asset limit for mobile home parks in the administrative policy mirrors the asset limits in the IHO, 1.5 times the buyer's income, with the addition of an exception of up to $500,000 in qualified retire accounts. Funds used to purchase an affordable housing unit are not counted as assets for purposes of determining eligibility. Even with the asset limitations in place, the city continues to receive requests for exceptions from the asset restrictions from interested buyers with assets beyond the asset limits. Most requests for exceptions to the asset limitations are from senior 55-plus buyers who are downsizing as part of their retirement plan. They combine the gains of the sale of their home with their retirement funds. Most prospective buyers have below $1 million in assets, and the city has granted these requests. 2 prospective buyers have had assets well in excess of $1 million, and those have been denied. Staff recommends that the IHO update be updated to explicitly apply to all asset limitations to all affordable housing in the city, regardless of when it was constructed, and to consolidate all eligibility requirements to be included in the IHO rather than requiring applicants to consult multiple sources. In addition, staff is recommending that the city include an increase to the existing asset limit for affordable housing units that are designated senior housing, 55 plus, from 1.5 to 3 times the annual household limit, and increase the $500,000 exception in qualified retirement accounts to $1 million, increased annually according to the Consumer Price Index. These increases would allow more seniors to qualify to purchase affordable senior units. The buyer's income would continue to be limited to the moderate household income identified in the previous table. This evening, staff is requesting direction from City Council on consolidating asset limits within the IHO and the staff recommended modification to the asset limits. Lastly, staff is looking for direction on policy item number 6. Should the city include additional alternatives to on-site production and in lieu fees within the IHO? Many jurisdictions include alternatives to boost affordable housing production in additional requirements requiring on-site affordable units or in lieu fees. Land dedications, off-site affordable housing production, and the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units subject to new affordability covenants are common alternative compliance measures. The council may discuss these or other options, and if the council desires to explore them further, staff will bring back more information during future meetings. Also, if council does not want to incorporate other alternatives at this time, council may direct staff to research additional alternatives during the 2023 housing element update. That concludes my presentation. Before you is the summary of the policy questions. I'm happy to answer any questions prior to going to public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's turn it over to council for any questions. We'll do the questions one at a time. So let's start with any council members that have questions on policy number 1. And I see council member Story's got his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Katie, thanks for that update. And I had a couple of questions, and the first one, in one of your early slides, you showed a change in the numbers, I guess the need for low income and very low income housing. Did I understand that right? That it had dropped from when we had originally kept track of those numbers?
Correct. So the demand has decreased from the 2011 numbers.
Right. And I guess, yeah, my question was, do we have an understanding of why that demand has dropped?
I'm thinking due to either increase in salaries as well as people moving out, or in the event that somebody passes on and the home is resold. So during resales and also increases in payment in salary.
Okay. Is there a possibility that because affordability has just become so much more difficult that the extremely low and very low aren't even, they're not as much making an effort to reside in Capitola?
You know, there's a term called gentrification of when people cannot afford to live in a place, but they get displaced. And I think that is part of what you're probably seeing in those numbers is people that have not been able to afford to live in Capitola who have moved, and folks with higher incomes moving into those units.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. My other question, and this is relevant to policy number 1 and the 15%. I noticed that that there's no, one, it seems like we have very few inclusionary units in Capitola. 12, I think, was the number you reported. But one of the threshold requirements is that only applies to developments that have 7+ units. And I'm just thinking, I mean, Capitola is mostly built out. Do we know how many opportunity sites there are that may accommodate 7+ units?
Typically, we see these as redevelopments when a larger parcel is looking to possibly be subdivided. I don't have an exact number for you on that, but you are right in that we don't have very many vacant lots at this point, so any of our larger lots would be a redevelopment project.
And so if we really wanted to increase the number of inclusionary housing, we'd either have to raise the percentage, but staff is not recommending that, or lower the number of units that it would apply to, which I saw in comparison. The city of Santa Cruz has lower inclusionary figures for lower numbers of units.
which we are recommending under a different policy, is to require an inclusionary unit for more than one unit on a site. So once you build two, to require an inclusionary unit. But we can talk about that when we get to policy number 3.
Yeah, but the staff is recommending that we retain the inclusionary percentage at 15%. But I assume the staff is also recommending that we keep it, that it only applies when there's more than 7 units.
Correct.
And I guess my question is, it seems to me that would be rarely used in Capitola any longer, that we would have developments of 7 units or more. Is my sense correct, or?
Within the new zoning code update, one thing to keep in mind is that we added mixed use to our community commercial zone and in the regional commercial area as well. So we may start seeing more applicants come in with mixed use projects than previously, but you are correct in that we're limited in land, and most projects would be redevelopment projects in which there's already existing units might be torn down and rebuilt.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Those were my questions for now.
Can I just chime in very quickly to respond to the question you asked there, Sam? And I think it's a very relevant one, which is how many units. This inclusionary ordinance has been in effect for more than 15 years, and we have 12 units, and 8 of them came from one project, villas, right? And I think realistically looking ahead, the way to get a significant number of affordable housing units is either A, to have projects like the villas or maybe like the Capitola Mall where there's a development agreement, or B, that we are able to accumulate housing trust funds. And back in the day, we used to have redevelopment funds to do this with, where we can partner with a nonprofit and then actually do these larger scale projects. I think at the end of the day, we're not going to ever see too many units that are going to come out of these 7, 8, 9 unit projects. It's just, over the next 10 years, my guess is it's 3 or 4 more units. Thank you.
Right. Councilmember Bertrand, you have questions about policy number 1?
Yeah, in general, the threshold of 15%, and if we're actually trying to get more money to accumulate so we actually have a good chance to partner, maybe we should be going up to 20%. Just put that out there. Does anyone on staff have any experience with how City of Santa Cruz has gone on this? A little follow-up on Sam's question, which I hadn't thought about asking this, but it didn't seem unique that they have a different approach. They actually want more units, depending on how many, more inclusionary units, depending on how many are actually being built. So those are the 2 questions I'm wondering about. What other communities around here have had in terms of their 20% inclusionary fee, and in particular what Santa Cruz has had in their experience with requiring more inclusionary units for smaller development projects.
So I can tell you that they require 20%. I'm not sure what their overall numbers are at in terms of how many affordable units they have and how successful it's been.
Okay. Yeah, I think, just walking around town, I know there's a lot of rather large lots. You brought up zoning changes for multi-use homes, and I think on Capitola, excuse me, but, that whole Tool Belt area, there's rather large lots. You don't notice them because they're behind big walls. You do have enough.
You muted yourself at the end there, Councilmember Bertrand. Can you repeat the end of that question?
Thank you. I believe we do have a number of rather large lots. I just mentioned on Capitola Road, there's about two that I can think of, maybe more depending on how you count them. And then in that toolbox area, there's a number of parcels there that are fairly large. I don't think you could get the same amount as we did on 38, but maybe 4 or 5 or so.
So one of the things to keep in mind, Councilmember Bertrand, is as the percentage of affordability requirements go up, what it does is it increases the overall development costs for a project. And so we have not done that kind of study where we analyze sort of the local real estate market and the development costs and figure out kind of where the potential thresholds are. In general, the reports I've seen are that 20% starts to become infeasible, that it starts to drive projects into you have to charge more for the remaining units than you can get on the market, and so they're not likely to be built. So that's one of the balancing acts with inclusionary is that you get some deed-restricted units, but then at the end of the day, the developers, if they're going to build a project, they need to be making up the cost somewhere else by getting more revenue off the other, charging more for the other projects. So we didn't come with a difference, and we're sort of recommending the 15% because it seems like that's been a number that works for us, but that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay. I think one of the, if I may, Mayor, one of the issues is how much the upfront costs are, as you just mentioned. And if the fees are graduated in terms of when they're paid, like within 4 years, 5 years, or something like that, the upfront cost is not as dramatic. I think there's ways we could deal with that, but I agree with you. I don't quite understand what the balance is. So if we could do anything to make that balance a little bit more in the direction of creating affordable housing, I think that's a plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bertrand. Any more questions about policy number 1? Seeing none, are there any council questions? Oh, Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, sorry. So my question is in your staff's recommendation is to maintain status quo, and you've showed us the amounts of inclusionary housing, but you haven't shown us where we are with our RHNA numbers. Where are we with meeting our RHNA numbers currently? And the second part of that question is to Jacques and Sam's point, is that it looks like if we're not meeting our RHNA numbers, then we're not doing a good job in building additional affordable housing. And so this question on policy 1 actually does, to Councilmember Story's point, really does correlate to policy question number 4. Those two things tie hand in hand about whether we should include an in-lieu fee or not. So my question specifically again is, where do we stand with our current RHNA numbers, and how many projects have we seen come and go because they couldn't meet the 15% threshold at this point? Or was it that they didn't build because we just didn't have space? So that's where I'm kind of getting hung up on. So when we make this kind of policy question, I don't know where the blame goes per se, if it's our percentage or if it's just because we don't have space.
Okay, so first I'll hit upon the RHNA numbers. On our RHNA numbers, we have not come close to meeting our RHNA numbers. So for above moderate income, we're meeting those numbers. So our redevelopment of new single-family homes, we meet the RHNA numbers for. We've almost met the number for above moderate income. So it's your market rate housing. In terms of meeting the RHNA numbers, when it's broken down into low, very low, and affordability rates, we have produced in the last RHNA cycle 1 new unit at Terra Court. So we're not close to meeting our RHNA numbers in that aspect. But in the second question about what examples of projects that have come through and why haven't we met those? you know, we actually had one density bonus application come through. It was approved, but in the end, it didn't pencil for the developer, and they ended up reselling it. And on that site, built 3 units rather than the 7-unit project that would have given us through the density bonus. Actually, it was, I think, 10 units total between the 2 properties. We would have gotten 2 new affordable units out of that project. It didn't pencil out, and so that's where there's this definite, we've got to find that happy medium between what our requirements are so that developers can come in and build these affordable units and it's not too much of a cost burden. So.
There's another point I'd like to chime in on this is that I think at this stage there's only about 13 cities around the state that are meeting the RHNA obligations. And a large part of that is due to the fact that the redevelopment agencies no longer exist. And redevelopment agencies used to provide housing set-aside funds that cities would use to provide that kind of capital seed money to build these important projects at those lower income levels. It's very hard to see a very low or low-income project. Very low-income projects, you really need to have those kinds of projects. Your IHO is never going to get it for you by itself. You need a program like the Bay Avenue Senior Project where we use the $1 million of redevelopment agency funds as seed money that was able to leverage, I think it was like $40 million other dollars to renovate the Bay Avenue Senior site, add the units, and get it all done. So, so in a sense, the key to meeting your RHNA at this point is having a pot of money so you can get the very low projects done, but at the same time also then seeing the market rate projects that come along and help with the moderate income and the higher affordability levels. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I will add some comments to your point, City Manager, later when it's comment time. So that's all I have for questions for Policy 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional council questions from Policy 1? Okay, we'll move on to questions on Policy 2. We're just at questions right now. We'll come back for comments after we go to public comment, but just questions. Policy 2, seeing none. Any questions on Policy 3? Seeing none. Any questions on Policy 4? Okay, Policy 5, questions? Okay, and finally, any questions on Policy 6? Oh, Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, I just need some more explanation about Policy 6. It just seems such like a broad, open-ended, what do you want to do with alternatives sort of thing. I just needed some more clarification on that. Thank you.
So for this policy question, we're asking, should we come back with other alternatives? Right now, within our IHO, it's limited to on-site production and in lieu fees. If you'd like, we can come back with more information on land dedication. Some IHOs include land dedication, off-site affordable housing. So when a development happens, they're not required to always build it on-site, but there's an option to build it off-site, which is tricky here in Capitola because, as we've talked about, there's not much land available for either land dedications or off-site development. You typically would find that in a less urban area in which there's plenty of land to be developed for those tools. And one that could apply to Capitola is the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units. So a developer buying existing units and then rehabbing them and de-restricting them as affordable units. That one could be utilized possibly in Capitola because of the amount of development we do have that could use updating. So that was just a question of, would you like us to come back with more information on that? And I also outlined in my presentation that the next time that we're updating the housing element in a couple of years, we could also dig deeper into that during the housing element update and bring you more information on those options if you'd rather not bring it into this update currently.
Thank you.
All right, I think Councilmember Story had his hand up, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Bertrand.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I actually had a question about policy number 2. I wasn't able to chime in fast enough as you were going through them. So if I may, I'd like to ask, the staff recommendation on policy 2 is that we eliminate the in lieu fees for rental housing. My question is how much are we talking about that the city would lose in lieu fees if we were to do that? And I guess I know you can't project what housing may be built over the next 5 years, but if we had implemented this over the last 5 years, or how much would we have lost in lieu fees?
I don't believe that the city has permitted a rental housing project since I don't believe that there's been a rental housing project that's been built since the IHO, to the best of my knowledge. Katie, can you help me out?
Yeah, I can chime in on this one. So I think the only rental housing project that we've seen is one on Capitola Avenue for 4 units that's yet to be built. Those are not condominiumized. And then one across the street from City Hall, which was 2 units above a commercial, just a duplex there. But that, we have not, those are the 2 that I've seen come through the city in my 7+ years there.
Katie, do you have a guesstimate as to how much the in lieu fees were for those 2 projects?
So the in lieu fee for the street, I'm not sure what the overall square footage was, but I would estimate somewhere about for the 4-plex, approximately 4,000 square feet at $6 a square foot.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll go next to Councilmember Bertrand had his hand up, and then after that, we'll go to Councilmember Bosworth.
Yeah, I had a question about too, but I guess the agreement with the mall would be separate than this if we struck the fees.
That's correct. The mall will be undergoing a development agreement with the mall, and it wouldn't be subject to there'd be an agreement in place for affordable housing.
Okay, and I'd like to come back later. The questions talk about 6. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bosworth.
Councilmember Tran asked my exact question. I didn't want to establish something in policy 2 that would affect them all, but Katie answered that, so thank you.
All right. Councilmember Bertrand, you said you had another question about policy 6?
Yes, I did. I'm very encouraged that this was put up because I think there's a lot that we need to think about as Yvette brought up. We're not meeting our requirements, and yes, the state may be deficient also, but maybe we can think of ways to solve these problems in different ways. In a way, this is a question, Katie, because you deal with permits. It seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong and give me a sense of how wrong I am or how right I am, that most of our permits are single homes. We're doing improvements, we're doing upgrades, we're tearing it down, building, something, much better from someone's standpoint, I guess. And so, in a sense, the second question is, our fees, whether they're 15% or we raise them up to 20%, will generate money to help us leverage. As Jamie mentioned, we need to have some way to generate money to leverage, and over time we could accumulate a pot of funds so we could actually accomplish a project with Mercy Housing, South Bay Housing, South County Housing, or something else like that. So those are my 2 questions.
So building up our fees would help definitely in leveraging for future projects. And I didn't catch the first question in that.
The first question was, I don't have an overall sense of what kind of permits we're giving out, but it's my sense that we're doing a lot of single-family home improvements, construction, an old house that is clearly falling apart, they're rebuilding it, that kind of thing. So I just want to get a sense there, and if that's the case, then our major way to raise money, and that was the second question, is whatever in lieu fees we charge them.
Correct. So as the city manager mentioned earlier, the majority of our development has been to single-family homes and for-sale projects. So as when we look at our in lieu fee and where the money has come from, it's been just that. The development of single-family homes and additions makes up, I would estimate, over 95%, if not higher, of our in lieu fees that we've taken in at the city level. So it's not we don't have very many multifamily projects that come through the city, and we definitely have very few rental projects that come through the city.
So a follow-up question, if I may, Mayor. So do you think taking away the fees from rentals, et cetera, would start skewing things in a different way? Maybe that would be good.
Well, the reason why we were suggesting taking away the rental fee is so that developers may be more enticed to produce rental housing. Right. Rental housing is definitely, actually, Capitola is a really healthy mix within within the types of housing we have in our community. We're about 50% rental and 50% ownership. We haven't had new rental applications or development projects come in the last decade, very minimal. So we were thinking by possibly removing that in lieu fee for rental, maybe it would be more enticing for developers to come in with rental projects, which are definitely a more affordable option for market rate versus it's more affordable than buying a condominium or a home. So
thank you.
It's definitely a necessary part of the housing ladder.
All right. Any additional council questions on any of these 6 policy questions? Going once. Councilmember Bertrand, do you have your hand up again?
Yes, I do. Sorry. So I was talking about 6. I'm glad staff put this in, and I do support the idea that we have some concerted effort to try to come up with options. One that came to mind is the difficulty in managing restricted units, low-income units that we've made possible through our zoning codes and our policies. And a way to deal with that, I think, which might have additional benefits, is to create a land trust for Capitola. And so that agency would manage these, and we might be able to get funds from other directions to support the acquisition, which was sort of mentioned a little bit in the presentation, acquisition of land, and put that in the land trust, and then they would take care of all the paperwork and manage that, so that indeed our policy of trying to provide low-income housing and our policy to make it easy for people to afford homes in Capitola, which, as you said, helps create a balanced community, and I totally support a balanced community. So if we come up with options with that discussion in 6, I wouldn't want to wait to the upgrade, the update. I'm sorry, I'm just
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to confirm that this is the time for questions. Do you have a question?
I know.
Okay. So there's no more questions?
No more questions.
Okay, we'll come back to you for comments as soon as we go to public comment. I just want to make sure that we're aware now is the time for questions only. Okay, and I'm seeing no additional questions from council members. So with that, we're going to bring this to public comment, and then we'll come back for additional comments from council. So I'm going to turn it over to Larry.
Mayor Peterson, I have a couple hands at this point. So first is David DiBiase. You should be able to unmute and speak.
Is that better? Does that work? Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I want to thank you all for your hard work on our behalf as you face what must be innumerable problems as you struggle through the COVID crisis. I live in Loma Vista Estates, which is a 55-plus 90-unit development on Clare Street, and we sent you 91 letters and signed petition signatures on this topic of asset limits. I would like to encourage the council to please read the letter from our attorney, where she explains in great detail not only the legal basis that controls the regulatory agreement, which has been in force for years between Loma Vista and the city, but it's also the controlling document between the city and us, and has always been. However, listening to the staff earlier, I think there is some substantial misunderstanding that I think could be clarified by reading our attorney's comments, giving the history and legal basis that they are basing the position that we have. It appears that staff is recommending the city no longer honor the asset limits for new buyers in our park that we agreed to with the city through our regulatory agreement. As I mentioned, we've been through this stance before. The city came to us before and wanted to do something. We had a meeting in the park, and 90% of the people, we had over half the park show up, and 90% of the people said no to the city. So this is just part two, revisited. The legal and binding regulatory agreement is still in place. It still stands. It was bilateral, took many months between you and us, reviewed by your legal counsel, by our legal counsel. We've acted on it, and we had to write multiple letters to the city because they often go off the ranch and try to impose things unilaterally that they're not legally entitled to try because they're bound by the regulatory agreement. So I want to thank you again, and I would highly encourage you to read the letter from the attorney so you get a 360 view based on the law and the other citations she included in the document. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we have Karen. You can unmute and speak now.
Hi, City Council. I'm talking on number 5, and I'm a senior, and I'm not in a senior park. I'm in Turner Lane, and I'm having real difficulties selling my house, and I was hoping they wouldn't put a restriction on 55 and over parks. That's my question.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any additional public comment on this item?
I have 2 emails, and I'll try and get those shared and read online.
And Larry, it looks like, if I'm not misunderstanding, it looks like 2 of those are from the same email address, so we're only addressing the one.
Okay. I will take a look and see.
Okay.
So I'm going to read this one aloud. Or I'm going to have the computer do it.
Hello, Mayor and Council members. I am Rhonda Trimble, and I live in Loma Vista Estates. My husband and I moved into our home in 2004. When we bought into Loma Vista, we understood there were restrictions placed on homeowners because of the regulatory agreement made in 2000 between the City of Capitola and Loma Vista Homeowners Association. The city specified certain regulations and the association agreed to follow them. In 2004, when the city wanted to make a change in the agreement and the association agreed to the change, it was mutually beneficial. Now the city wants to make changes to the contract, without the agreement of the association, by using an IHO ordinance to circumvent normal negotiating procedure. The city presented proposed changes several years ago. The homeowners listened to the city's request and understood it did not benefit them. We even had an election so the city could clearly understand that the homeowners were overwhelmingly opposed to the changes in the agreement. Now, because current negotiations are not producing the outcome the city desires, the city is trying to slip through an item in the IHO ordinance that affects the regulatory agreement they have with Loma Vista. I personally think this is a sneaky way to circumvent legal process. The change in how assets are counted for potential buyers is not beneficial for the residents in Loma Vista. Our homes currently sell at lower prices compared to other resident-owned parks in the city. This is because of the regulatory agreement. New restrictions on potential buyers will only cause a reduction in buyers for our homes. That will cause a loss of value for current homeowners. When our park was bought by the residents, the City of Capitola was happy to help. It granted us monies, with conditions, in the form of the regulatory agreement, to assist in the sale. The regulatory agreement states in Section 6.9 amendments / this agreement may be amended only by a written instrument executed by all the parties hereto or their successors in title, and duly recorded in the real property records of the County of Santa Cruz, California. In the First Amendment, Section 3 states, full force and effect. Except as set forth in this First Amendment, the regulatory agreement has not been amended and is in full force and effect. Mayor and City Council members, I urge you to reject policy item number 5 as part of the IHO. Respectfully submitted. Rhonda Trimble.
Okay, so let me see if the other one's from the same email address. It is not from someone else.
My apologies.
No, that's fine. Sorry. I'll try and get the right one this time, sorry.
Wife and I have lived at Loma Vista Estates Mobile Home Park for 16 years. Loma Vista is a senior park. We've enjoyed living in a resident-owned park where our members manage the park and decide upon the rent. The concept is, we all own our homes and we rent our spaces. Our rent is about $400 per month, which includes a park mortgage payment of $164 per member. We are all volunteers, no employees. Loma Vista is a solid community, where neighbors help their neighbors. Every election, politicians walk our park. We have about 125 residents. The politicians tell us that we are heavy voters. I'm sure that has nothing to do with our waistlines. Council members, we have a contract with the city and we have performed under that contract for 20 years. What possible benefit could the city receive by ignoring our contract? What would motivate the city to damage our property values? I'd sure like to know the answer to those questions. Thank you and good evening.
Okay, those are the two comments. And I don't see anyone else with a new hand raised.
All right. Thank you so much for those who've offered public comment, both via Zoom and in email. I will bring it back to council for discussion and guidance on moving forward. Does anyone have any comments? I don't see any hands raised. Maybe a moment of thought amongst the council members. Councilmember Bottorff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to make a comment. We kind of goes across the line on a lot of the issues. I know something came up about the RHNA numbers, and there was also something about, additional alternatives. And there was a lot of discussion about our city being built out and not having a lot of property left to develop on. I think what we need to really look at, a lot of these, I know we need to do this. This policy definitely needs to be updated, and we need to make sure that we give our best effort at doing that. But fundamentally, how I see Capitola moving forward is there's two opportunities. RHNA numbers are something that we've always been behind on ever since I got on the council. And as I think as the city manager mentioned, most cities don't catch up. But keep in mind that should the mall be a productive product that we engage in, we will not only meet, but we will exceed our RHNA numbers with the potential development there for years to come. And the other option is that the way I see us meeting RHNA numbers regardless of the mall is I think that because of the state and programs with ADUs, this is really the new way that we actually address affordable housing and provide opportunities to meet the numbers, provide the housing, and actually assist homeowners, some of them, the ability to stay in their homes. So I'm not too concerned about whether we have parcels to develop or how we're going to allocate money, or I don't want to create a burden with a lot of these policies for something for the city to manage, because I think moving forward that that's going to be the future of how we meet our state RHNA numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bosworth. Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. So, I think it's my responsibility to ensure that we do our best in creating inclusionary housing within our community. And it's my responsibility to familiarize myself on where we are currently with the units we have. And it's also my responsibility to create policy that will be beneficial long term. And inclusionary housing means to create housing throughout an entire community, not necessarily just in one place like the mall. And I don't want to bank on just the mall. And to really ensure that we create opportunities for all types of families to be able to live and afford to live here, from young families to retirees and so forth. So I feel like that's my responsibility to really be thoughtful about the policy we create, as well as to, even though it may be work for our staff, it's the job and the task of our staff to look at this. So I just have a quick question, Katie. Do you want us to go one by one on each policy and kind of where we'd like to, some general direction? Is that what you'd like?
That would be helpful. I'm going to look to the mayor. Do you want to go through each policy, Mayor, and get direction, or have each council member go through each policy for us?
Yeah, let's go through each of the policy items one at a time, and then as we go through, if any of the council members have comments, they can make them at that time.
Mayor Peterson, do you want me to continue with policy 1 then?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just for policy 1, I agree with staff's recommendations to maintain the percentage. However, I'd like for us to look at the option of reducing the 7 to something less. So I saw option like 5 or 6 or something like that. As noted, there's not many places for complexes of 7 plus. Our city manager mentioned that, there's an option to pay and lose fees, which we'll get to in policy 4. But what I want to say about that is that ideally in all of these policies that we make decisions on today, my goal would be that we ensure that we build housing now. There's a need for housing now, and to bank on collecting money for us to put aside to build other projects in the near future. I don't know how likely that is, and maybe that's something staff could come back to on really what those partnerships could look like for us should we create in lieu fees as an option. So that would be just my direction for policy 1 at this point.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brooks. I think Jacques, Councilmember Bertrand had his hand up, and then we'll go to Councilmember Bosworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I generally go along with what you said. I think Sam brought this up in terms of what City of Santa Cruz does. Instead of having a limit of 7, divide it up so that we get housing for smaller projects that are inclusionary. Another way to look at it, and I'm thinking, staff could, when they come back, to present some options based on this discussion, not necessarily a definite direction at this point, but another option would be to give the developers some leeway in how they meet the requirements. And one perhaps way to do that is in the inclusionary units, they don't have to be as large as the ones on the project right now. So the one on 38 is if they had considered something that had several inclusionary units that were of smaller square footage, it would cost the developer a lot less, but they could have built maybe 2 or 3. That is an option. So the idea that just talked about, and also try to come up with options that the developer can use to best meet our requirements to get inclusionary housing. And the one I just mentioned was lower square footage units. I'd much rather have units rather than the fees. But if we're going to collect the fees, maybe in our further discussion, we could increase that amount to 20%. Those are my comments on 1.
Thank you, Councilmember Bertrand. Does any other, Councilmember Bosworth.
Thank you, Mayor. To the question, should the city maintain the existing required percentage at 15%? My answer is yes. Thank you.
All right. Any other council discussion on policy item 1? Katie, do you feel that you have, I guess, since we're not technically voting tonight, it says we're just providing direction. Do you feel like you have direction on policy item 1?
I'm wondering if Councilmember Story would like to provide any feedback with their support for maintaining it at 15%.
Yes, I support retaining it at 15% currently. However, I also support giving the developer the option of paying in lieu fees, and thereby reducing the number of units that would apply to, similar to what the city of Santa Cruz has done. Because if you don't do that, it ends up being more than 16% if you don't allow them the option of providing in lieu fees. And I understand, it's better to have housing now than to have to wait. But I think that one thing, if you have sufficient fees, they can be leveraged to benefit, I think, major large projects all at one fell swoop. That's what the Bay Avenue senior housing project was accomplished that way. And so, and I believe trying to find the sweet spot of providing kind of incentives to the developer, giving them options of how they want to do it. I like what Jacques mentioned about maybe they'd have the option of building more smaller units. And I think providing that kind of flexibility may move us forward to being able to encourage developers to build more units in Capitola. And so I think so. Yeah, I'm in support of keeping it at 15%, but lowering the number of units. And I think that also means giving the option of in lieu fees. So I hope that answers your question, Katie.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bosworth, do you have your hand up for additional comments on policy item 1?
I'm going to take it down right now. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, we're going to move on then to policy question number 2. Should developments of rental units be exempt from the IHO? Do any council members have comments on this item? Councilmember Bosworth.
Yes, they should be exempt. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Story, and then we'll go to Councilmember Bertrand.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It almost, with so few rental units being developed in Capitola, over the past several years, it's almost a moot point. However, one thing I've noticed that what the city of Salinas has done for rental units is they have a couple of levels. I think it's $5 a square foot, but down to $2 a square foot. If the developer is willing to accept subsidized housing, the vouchers within their project. And I'd say that if we're going to be eliminating or reducing the in lieu fees, that there be some sort of trade-off that they'd be willing to accept the Section 8 housing or other subsidized housing that we may be able to provide, using our whatever in lieu fees we may have or what rental assistance fees that we may have. So that's just, a trade-off that I'd like to see on that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Story. Councilmember Bertrand?
Yeah, thank you. I had a problem with reducing the fees to zero. In general, I feel when a development happens in any community, there's going to be an impact. And in this case, it's a housing development, and their impact should help us solve our problems. Their particular project won't do it, but an accumulation of everyone's fees will help continue that. So I think we should have a little more discussion on this point. I would like to keep the fees in place. But Sam had me thinking that if we lower the fee, I don't want to get rid of it, but if we lower the fee and there's something we get out of it that's a benefit, then maybe that's worth discussion. So when staff comes back, maybe there could be some examples like Salinas and other areas around here, and if that's a way we could get some leverage out of lowering these fees, then I would support the city going in a different direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bertrand. Vice Mayor Brooks?
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate staff attaching the MVAP white paper to our staff report. It touches on this item pretty significantly, and so therefore I'm in favor of removing rental units. They should be exempt from the IHO. I would like to see more information further on what Councilmember Story is referring to at our next meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vice Mayor Brooks. Katie, do you feel that you have general consensus from the council on policy 2?
I do, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mayor
Peterson, let me just kind of chime in for a second here. It might be helpful to hear your perspective on this item. I missed it if you did give us your feedback.
No, I haven't. I typically just kind of stay quiet if what I was going to say has already been said. But yeah, no, I agree. The development of the rental units, having them exempt from the IHO, I think, as the MDEP white paper mentioned, exempting them provides the opportunity for additional developments of rental units that otherwise, as mentioned in the example from staff, might not be built or might not be built with as many units as they would have if they have to pay these kind of fees. So I'm in agreement with my fellow council members on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and just a reminder to those watching and listening and to council, tonight is there will not be a vote on this. We are providing guidance to staff, and staff will return with a first reading at a future meeting. So policy number 3, what is the guidance we would like to give the staff on what the city should require of developers of large additions to existing home and smaller 1 to 6 unit developments? And if we can go back, the suggestion from staff, the staff recommendation was to implement impact fees for single family development and developments of 2 to 6 units. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct. I'm pulling up this slide to show you our staff recommendation on this.
That'd be great, thank you.
So our staff recommendation here was to implement an affordable housing impact fee for single-family developments with only 1 unit or in addition to a single-family home, and then require developments of 2 to 6 units to provide 1 affordable unit or pay the in lieu fee based on square footage of the unit.
Okay. Vice Mayor Brooks.
So I'm okay with moving forward on implementing the Nexus study to determine what impact development has on the city's affordable housing stock. I'm in favor of that. But to kind of go back to policy number 1 as we examine, and Katie, please jump in if I'm mixing 2 things. But since we've just asked for information to come back regarding 7+ units or a different number, I don't know that the staff recommendation would coincide. So I'm fine with moving forward with the Nexus study, and then looking at our options thereafter regarding the 2 to 6 units at that point.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor Brooks. I believe, and I apologize, I didn't see whose hand went up first, but I believe it was Councilmember Story and then Councilmember Bertrand.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I agree with Councilwoman Brooks about doing the Nexus study. I think we should look at in those fees for the 2 to 6 unit development, because those are done by developers, okay? And so, and I think that does have an impact upon our ability to provide affordable housing. I'm more reluctant to apply an in lieu fee to a single, family development, or in addition to a single family home, because I think that impacts a lot of local residents or maybe trying to expand or upgrade their homes, and it just adds more costs. I would want to see what those additional costs are going to be for residents. And I also, one observation I've seen concerning the single-family residents, people who are coming in and developing second homes and vacation homes and taking that housing stock out of our local market, I think does impact our availability of housing stock and therefore the price of housing. But I would be curious about whether we are able to even process and distinguish for the single-family development between local owner-occupied developments and other developments which are for vacation homes, Airbnb, or even for rarely used second homes. So those are my thoughts on that subject.
do want to see if staff has an answer to that, Councilmember Story, on if we can differentiate between owner-occupied and vacation homes?
I think if they're coming back to us, I would just maybe put that out there and have them, I mean, I would like to maybe see an analysis of that. But, I mean, if they want to, kind of dismiss it out of hand, and I'm fine with that as well. But I would, if that's the case, I wouldn't want to see, if there's going to be impact fees or in-lieu fees on single-family development, I certainly want to see what those costs would be to local residents.
Okay. All right. Katie, is that something you can bring back?
Yes.
Discuss this again?
Yeah, I can bring back more information on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Bertrand. You're still muted, Councilmember Bertrand. Doc, are you still with us, or did you freeze? Oh, no, there you are. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay. So I generally support the staff recommendation here, and again, I'd like to support in-lieu fees because I think that contributes in the long run to helping our community solve problems. I think the Bay Area, some of the cities in the Bay Area have ordinances that deal with assessing fees to vacation homes and stuff like that because, again, vacation homes take away from, a vibrant community. The people on them aren't here that much, not on an everyday basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bosworth, you have comments?
Yeah, I am basically in support of the Nexus plan to establish an impact fee. I think that the Nexus report should give us an insight as to how we are affected by either an addition or a single-family dwelling, and what that report gives us and how we can face that fee. With regard to the development, I'm okay with a in-lieu fee for 2 to 6. I'm not really interested in providing a unit. I think that we're better off using the in-lieu fee to create a fund to do a bigger project than to have onesie, twosie type of development. And I'm not taking a position to oppose vacation rentals or how people choose to use their property. I think we're getting on very, ground when we start making restrictions on assessing fees to what's a vacation rental and how that affects, our property. I think that some people who are buying second homes and who have built these properties, their property is assessed at a newer rate, which generates a whole lot more money for revenue for the city of Capitola, and I think there has to be some conscious recognition of necessary revenues to run the city. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Bosworth. I am also in favor of the Nexus study. I would be interested, however, in hearing a little bit more on the concept of the difference between the fees for single-family homes that are owner-occupied and those that are essentially vacation homes or vacation rentals. Is there any other comments on policy item 3? All right, seeing none. Katie, we're good on number 3?
Yes. I'm going to pull up the, give me one moment to pull this up.
Sure. All right, so we're moving on to number 4. Should the city structure the IHO requirements to allow an option for developers to pay in-lieu fees? And Katie, would you mind pulling up the staff recommendation slide for this, just for a reminder?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we are recommending that the city adopt an option for developers to pay the in-lieu fee. So this is when there's 1 unit out of 7 is required, or we'd add an option to pay an in-lieu fee, and we're recommending an option be added.
Okay. Councilmember Bosworth.
I support policy 4, staff recommendation.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not in favor of creating an in-lieu fee, so I'd like staff to come back with what those in-lieu fees would be and some options around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brooks. Yeah, I'd be happy to learn more about what those fees would be. Councilmember Story, Councilmember Bertrand, any comments on policy 4?
I think Yvette captured my comments.
Okay.
Yes, and I believe you guys have as well. I would be interested in seeing how much those fees may be, so we know what we're maybe approving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Katie, sounds like we're just looking for additional information on this one.
Okay.
Max. Moving on, policy 5. Does the city council support staff recommended modifications to the asset limit? And it sounds like, I mean, it doesn't sound like we need to see the staff recommendation because it's mentioned in policy 5, if we support staff recommendation modifications or not. I believe Vice Mayor Brooks had her hand up first, and then we'll go to Councilmember Bosworth.
Yeah, at this point, I'm unsure about the direction that staff is giving. I just have a question if you guys could come back with it. You made mention in the staff report about the consumer price index, and I'm just wondering how you got to that, and if you could break that in relation to all of the mobile home parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brooks. Councilmember Bosworth?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, with regard to this item, I support staff recommendations for the asset limits modifications to increase them. I want to keep in mind that you know, my main concern on this topic is that I am trying to do whatever I can to make sure that we provide affordable housing and affordable senior units in this community. That's what my decisions are based on this topic. So I'm trying to be as flexible as I can to allow people to get into those units, and I think that I will be okay with increasing that limit to try to accommodate that increase.
Thank you, Councilmember Bosworth. I certainly echo your desire to ensure that we can get affordable housing throughout the city. Councilmember Bertrand, Councilmember Story, any addition? Oh, Councilmember Bertrand, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I support the sentiment that Ed has voiced. Capitol, for a long time, if I may stray, has been very supportive of mobile homes and recognizes that the mobile homes that we have a large percentage of rentals there and home ownership actually through that option. And it makes this area very affordable to people who otherwise would not be able to live in a community as wonderful as ours. And I say that with complete sincerity. This is a program that we should help. And I think also raising limits in terms of access limits is in recognition of the fact that people now have been able to save and support retirement. These are generally for communities that are older, 55 and older, and they've been responsible, and I recognize that, and now they're able to get into a place that meets their needs as they age, and that's what we've done, and I think a lot of other people have done that too. So I support the general sentiment here, especially of that detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bosworth, do you have your hand up again?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments on policy item 5? Nope. Okay. Staff, do you have general guidance?
I think so. Mayor Peterson, were you in support of Councilmember Bosworth's comment?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the last one, policy item 6. Should the city include additional alternatives to on-site production and in-lieu feed within the IHO? So essentially the staff recommendation here is we either direct staff to bring back information during a future meeting on additional alternatives for the IHO or postpone research on additional alternatives until the next housing element update in 2023. We'll go to Councilmember Bertrand and then Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, I think with a great deal of thought and time to prepare, staff could come up with some great recommendations and policy discussion points. I'll just go back to something that Ed mentioned earlier, and I think that now that we have a great ADU ordinance, this is probably going to be one of the better ways for us to expand housing. I'm not too. I mean, I would like more rental housing, but I don't see that happening here. But I do see, because I see it all over my neighborhood, and when I walk the city, I see it. People building ADUs and trying to basically provide for older relatives, or even make the rent a little bit easier for them in terms of the houses that they own. And I think that's our future in many respects. It will create a neighborhood that, well, that's nonetheless. I think when we try to find ways to spend our money that we've accumulated to the fees that we've added to development, this might be a way to help support expanding our housing base by helping residents do ADUs. And I also mentioned earlier trying to create a housing land trust, maybe a way we could help manage the time necessary to keep the rentals and all that sort of straight so that we're following our policy. But I really do support the fact that staff came up with this idea, and I think there's probably a lot of potential here. And as Jamie said, we don't have older mechanisms. We're going to have to think of new mechanisms to solve a real problem, which is to provide affordable housing to people in this community so that, as I've said before, it's a balanced community. And I think overall we'll be much happier when we have a balanced community and do all that it takes to create a balanced community. Thank you very much.
So, Councilmember Bertrand, are you agreeing with which part of the staff recommendation are you supporting, if either?
Well, to me, this is an overall thing, and it could go many different directions. But I want to see alternatives, and like I just closed with, we have to figure out different ways to solve a very real problem to meet affordable housing. And in general, I support trying to create a balanced community. And I feel that's a much healthier place for people to live and raise your kids and to retire in.
So you would like to see those alternatives brought back at a future meeting or postponed until 2023?
Oh, no, I thought I said at the beginning. No, I think it should come back, definitely. I don't want to wait till 2023, but what I was trying to suggest when I first started talking is we need some effort to make this to be a good presentation and a good choice of policy discussion points for us. I wouldn't want it back in a week or 2 weeks, but maybe like a 4 to 6 months. This is going to take some time to develop something, I think.
Got it. All right, Vice Mayor Brooks.
Yeah, I'd like for staff to come back with information on additional alternatives sooner than later. So I'm in agreement with Councilmember Bertrand. Katie, you specifically mentioned options for deed restrictions and developers' fees. I'm not sure how that correlates with our current IHO altogether, but if you could bring back some of those alternatives, in the future, at a future meeting. And also what I'd like to see is you've attached the white paper from MDAP in our packets today. And it would be great to see where the city stands in correlation to those recommendations. So as you bring back the other policies, it'd be nice to see how that relates and how well we're doing. So then that may alter our decisions on percentages of in-lieu fees and so forth. And I do like Jacques' recommendation of looking into a land trust. If we do decide to add in-lieu fees, it'd be neat to see what some of those options are, and if there's space for that, or just some of those alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bosworth?
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to policy 6, I think that I'm leaning towards that we need to postpone this until 2023. I think staff, this project IHO in itself, and all the questions and the options that we've got in the previous 5 policies is overwhelming staff, considering especially that right now with COVID, that department's community development is down 1 person. So I'm thinking that this is not essential. This one component does not make or break this policy, and I think the other ones are more definite. So I would lean towards postponing this until the 2023 housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bosworth. Councilmember Story, do you have any additional comments on this policy item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I kind of share the sentiments of Councilman Gorthoff. I mean, this is many significant issues, and it may be better to put it off until the housing element renewal. With that said, I am interested in having an update at the next meeting about how we're doing with our ADU permitting and our density bonus law that we state law and that we implemented some years back, and then the affordable housing overlay. I'd like to get a sense of how successful those policy initiatives have been or not. And then, maybe we could look at tweaking those without too much staff effort at that point to try to make them maybe even more successful. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Story. In regard to my thoughts on this, is it possible essentially to do both? Can we have information brought back to us at a future meeting, and then also in 2023 revisit this again? Or is it one or the other?
No, that's possible, but I do. When we included this item, I think we were trying to toss out some ideas that we'd seen in other jurisdictions that maybe there was some interest in the council in considering, like the land dedication and some of these things. If what we're talking about is looking at establishing, I think Councilmember Bertrand called it a land trust. It sounds to me like it's sort of a separate government entity that maybe manages affordable housing. That's a really big question. And I mean, I think bifurcating that from the the inclusionary update would probably be wise. So I just don't think that we're going to be able to address all of these different questions that have come up in the context of the IHO unless we really want to say, hey, the IHO is going to be 6 months out. So I think my recommendation is let's identify maybe there's some cool policy things we want to focus on over the next year, 2, 3 years, because we get into the next housing element. Try and keep it a little bit more narrow, or understand that the IHO is going to be a bigger thing, and it's going to, we're just going to put it on a different timeline. And that's okay too, if the council wants to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've got 3 council members with their hands up, so let's go ahead and wrap up with our final comments on policy item 6. We're right at the end here. We spent about an hour and a half on this item alone, so let's get our final thoughts in, and then we'll move along. Councilmember Bertrand.
Following from Sam and then Jamie touching it a little bit more, I think in a lot of discussions, this is a perfect example. There are things that we could probably act on very easily, or if not easily, sooner than later. And so I support looking at the problem from that perspective. The land trust could take a little bit of effort. It's not a separate government entity. It would be a nonprofit. But that would be perhaps a longer term thing. And as Sam said, well, maybe there's some programs that we have on board right now and they need to be tweaked because they're not performing as we would wish they performed. So maybe that's something we could look at in a more closer time frame. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Brooks? You have final comments, Vice Mayor Brooks?
Oh, sorry, I paused there. I apologize for that. So I just feel like we kind of got sucked into this policy like it was a trick question, city manager. So if there are options that we've kind of made reference to, if those could just be brought back, that would be my ask in relation to what you were talking about, Jamie, or those other things that seem more feasible to include with the current update. So that's what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Katie, do you feel like you have guidance on this, or is it clear?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing, the conversation got very broad for a moment there of talking about including things that are outside of the IHO. So I just want to be clear that this question is really asking about alternatives to producing on-site housing and amenities. Some of the larger questions about a land trust, that really is not, that's something we can definitely come back to and have conversations about that separately in the future, but I want to set the expectation that we're going to bring back alternatives to the on-site and in lieu fee, and those alternatives would include items such as land dedication. So if someone was developing a project, they could opt to dedicate land to the city. Like I said, it probably won't use that often because we have limited land. Offset affordable housing production, and possible acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units. So we can bring, I'm hearing that you would like us to bring forth options, but I just want to keep this within the limits of what could be within an IHO. I understand there's also a desire to have an update on ADU permits. That is, we can do that, but it is separate from the IHO. The ADUs, we just updated our ordinance on that, and yes, we have had movement on ADUs, and I can bring back discussion on that. The density bonus law also separate from the IHO update, but we can bring back information, but that won't impact the IHO update, to be clear. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, and all the staff that's worked on this, and council members, everyone that provided public comment. Thank you very much. As I mentioned previously, there's no vote on this item. Council's just providing guidance to staff. So we are going to move on along to item 8E. Adopt a resolution declaring an emergency condition pertaining to the CZU Lightning Complex fire.
Okay, bear with me for a second here while I pull up the PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay, this should do it. Okay, we'll do this from here. So on August 16th, there was a very uncommon lightning storm that struck the county as well as all of Northern California, resulting in the multiple fires being started between the 16th and the 18th. A lot of those fires ended up merging back in the redwood forest between Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties. And then due to the fire's spread, on August 19th, Santa Cruz County declared it a local emergency. Oops. Between August 19th and the 21st, the communities of Bonnie Doon, Boulder Creek, Ben Lomond, and Felton, Scotts Valley, and the UC campus were all evacuated. On August 19th, the Santa Cruz County made a mutual aid request of other local jurisdictions in the county. And then on August 20th, as Emergency Services Director, I declared a local emergency based on the regional conditions and the need for mutual aid. Our emergency response and our support has been 4 officers, each split between two 12-hour shifts daily. We initially were looking at opening the Jade Street Community Center as an evacuation shelter. However, with the COVID restrictions and the need for social distancing, we really determined that the number of people that could be accommodated there versus larger sites, it just didn't make sense to put the resources into staffing and setting up Jade Street Community Center. So the county EOC decided they were going to focus on larger sites. As of today, we have 81,000 acres that are burned. The fire is being reported as 21% contained. There's 635 structures so far reported destroyed. There's 1 death. The good news is that I think many of you may have heard Scotts Valley has been allowed to repopulate as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So the recommendation this evening is for the council to adopt a resolution declaring an emergency condition continues to exist and continue the local emergency. And I guess the one point I didn't make is that the reason for the local emergency has to do with obviously the mutual aid we're providing and the conditions countywide, but also to ensure that we can be reimbursed for our part in the overall emergency response. And with that, I'm available for questions.
All right, council members, are there any questions for City Manager Goldstein? I am seeing none. So with that, we will open public comment on this item. Turn it over to Larry to let us know if there's any public comment.
I do not see any hands raised, excuse me, Mayor, and I do not see any emails on this item.
Okay. With that, we'll close public comment, bring it back to council for discussion and a vote.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Motion by Councilmember Story. Do we have a second? Councilmember Bertrand, I think you're trying to speak, but you're muted. I can see your lips moving, but no sound.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Story, seconded by Councilmember Bosworth. Okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Councilmember Bertrand.
I think our city clerk might be muted.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
I apologize. Councilmember Bertrand.
Give it a thumbs up.
Okay, great. Councilmember Bottorff.
Aye.
Councilmember Story.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brooks.
Aye.
And Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Madam Mayor? Madam
Yes.
Mayor? It appears that there's someone on the attendees that wanted to speak. There's a hand up, so I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't see any hands up when I called for public comment.
It was late. But
Yeah.
it's here now, okay?
Okay, let's go ahead and reopen for this one public comment, and then we'll move to our final item.
Hi, good evening, folks. This is Leah Samuels, Executive Director of Timmins Care Alliance. Thanks for being here so late. When we're thinking about declaring emergency and such, I just hope you'll keep in mind when you revisit your budget that once again, as we face an emergency, the nonprofits whose grant funding was cut are on the front line helping your neighbors. This isn't a community service, it's direct, essential safety and health services. We're asking that you consider, when you look at the budget moving forward, moving funding from non-essential programs and indirect spending to support these heroes. CAL FIRE has recognized how impressive our community response, led by local nonprofits, has been. Many of the nonprofits that you were assisting are those social justice leaders want to see getting priority like police for public safety. I know some of you protest and organize for social justice. This is a way to be a leader and make the change that you are trying to ask for. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will reclose public comment and go on to our final item, 8F, designation of a voting delegate and alternate for the 2020 League of California Cities Annual Conference. Is there a staff report on this, or is it pretty straightforward? Sounds like what it is.
It's pretty straightforward. We need to designate a delegate. The conference is October 7th through 9th. Normally, it requires a council member to go. This will be a virtual conference. The delegate is the person who can vote on behalf of the city on the different league initiatives and league policy positions.
Okay, great.
Do you have any questions?
Okay, is there any questions on this item? Let's go back to panelists. Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Bosworth. Question?
Is there anyone of the council that's planning on attending this virtual conference?
I'm planning on attending.
That does it.
All right. Let's bring it to public comment on this item. Turn it over to Larry.
I do not see any hands raised, and let me check email, and I do not see any emails on this item.
All right, we'll bring it back to council for discussion and a vote. I am planning on attending virtually. I've attended in person before. I think I was our delegate last year. I can't even remember what year it is anymore, because last year feels like last week, and last week feels like last year. So,
we nominate the mayor.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second for the voting delegate. We also need an alternate. Anyone interested?
Motion to nominate the vice mayor.
Did I see
Second.
Stop it. Did I see Councilmember Bertrand is attending?
Oh.
Yeah, so could I nominate Councilmember Bertrand since he's attending?
I withdraw my motion of Vice Mayor Brooks and would like to amend it if the second would amend it to Councilman Bertrand.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for myself as the voting delegate, and a motion and a second for Councilmember Bertrand as the alternate for the 2020 League of California Cities Annual Conference. Do we need a vote on both of those motions?
You can do it together.
Okay, let's do a vote on those two motions, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Bertrand?
He's given a thumbs up again. I think he's got some audio issues.
That's wonderful. Councilmember Bottorff?
Aye.
Councilmember Story?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brooks?
Aye.
And Mayor Peterson?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Councilmember Bosworth, you have your hand up. Do you have a comment?
I've had my hand up all night by mistake. I've been a nuisance and I apologize, okay?
I'm just making sure you want to have like the last word on this or something.
You have the last word.
Okay. All right. With that, we have come to the end of tonight's agenda. Thank you so much to staff for all of your hard work on all of the staff reports and the recommendations for this evening. Thank you for all of you who have joined us for the last several hours to provide public comment. As always, and especially now more than ever, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. and we'll see you next time. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.